Hey people, Dustin Dolby here. Today we're going to use Speedlights to capture and composite a frozen motion cosmetic photography image and something with plenty of drip. And a big thanks to FlexiSpot for sponsoring today's episode. Thank you so much to bajenov.photo. You can check them out on Instagram for the photo idea for today's workflow. I'll link their profile below. They shared a BTS image that was super simple and explained how to capture something similar like this. And I mean, essentially, we're looking for a photorealistic composite, something that's kind of fun and different. It's a cool exercise. And I also think it's just a cool way to learn compositing. So buckle up, entry-level gear, Speedlights and a kit lens. What's not to love? This is my cup of tea. So let's dive in. So I'm just putting up a black background so we can ensure our background values are knocking down into good, crisp, pure black. Now I'm bringing out one strip box to light this with to start, the 8x36 inch. And we have a Speedlight here in the back. Now our horizontal light stand support plate, our workflow plate here we're using, just to hold the cosmetic, and it's extended as much as possible because we're going to be compositing, so we want as much data as we can get our hands on. Ideally, I'm going to want to light this whole thing. This little blemish here, not a huge deal. We could have replaced it with a new unit, but it's in a really non-offensive place. So we'll just keep trekking here. So I'm just bringing in a diffuser to carry that gradient across the face of our cosmetic. And we covered a similar topic last week, so make sure you check out last week's video. But this should also help us not only catch that, but also catch the debossment. There's a small sunken in heart logo on the front of the cosmetic. We're gonna catch some more highlights to define things like that. And the sunken in logo, you see a nice highlight on the counter side, and it's actually textured. If you take a look, it's textured inside. And when you shoot side directionally, I believe you enhance texture because you catch the fibers going sideways and it kind of makes it more obvious. So that's a little food for thought tidbit. If you find yourself with any questions as we go, make sure to leave them below. I will get back to you. I'm very active in the chat. So I'm just moving our highlight forward a little bit so we can establish a darker perimeter around the cosmetic. We lost this really attractive edge light around the top of the spade shape. That might actually be worth comping back in. But in general, I like this padding, and I'm going to later want to add a highlight in this scoop area because right now it's kind of like a flat red spade. It kind of looks like it's off a playing card almost. And in real life, it's very shapely, so that'll be something to look out for. So I'm going for a bit of an edge light here with our second strip box. And this is gonna be really low power. I'm at 1/32nd power on this bad boy, and I'm at 1/8 on that bad boy. So you see that's kind of nice how before it was falling off quite boldly. We're not reflecting any light. So by putting in an edge light, you allow yourself to do really bold lighting without the muddiness of not knowing where the product confidently is defined on the far side, which is kind of useful. So what are you guys feeling? Extra thick? I think the thin will work better with the drip because it'll be a little more refined and not take up a huge amount of the drip. Okay, so I'm gonna do a quick little bounce just for the top of the scoop. And then once we get the top of the cosmetic a little brighter, I think we'll have a nice little setup here for a pretty clean composite. I'm probably gonna go with something pretty simple like this because, you know, there's a nice thick base that we can use to composite into the cosmetic, which is what I'm gonna show you next in Photoshop. And the drip is just really linear and simple, so we can manipulate this to our heart's content. But either way, let's run into Photoshop and I'll show you how I could easily composite this. It doesn't take too long, and I'll meet you on the other side. Before that, let me show you our FlexiSpot standing desk I've been working with lately in our home studio. And like a lot of people, whether you're editing from home or working from home, occasionally I'll spend hours sitting in front of a computer, and I have to say I've been loving the flexibility to raise things up, enjoy a nice clean workspace, especially during product photography where you know I love tethering to a computer. It's been really useful. September 27th, 2021 is their standiversary, so feel free to use our link below for an exclusive discount. Thank you to FlexiSpot. Now let's hop back in the edit. All right, so we're gonna composite these frames together. Please take a quick second to thumb up the video to spread it around the internet for me. I'd appreciate that. And let's get right into this. So we have our two frames, our base frame and our drip frame. And we're just gonna clip them out really quickly so we're just dealing with the parts we wanna deal with. So I'm going to use the lasso tool. And since we're on a black background, we can crudely just cut that out. And then with the selection present, I'm going to hit this button down here to create a layer mask with that selection present. Pretty easy. And I'll do the same thing with the base frame, the cosmetic. I'll make a crude mask around it. And I will use this button to create a layer mask. So now we have these two layers, and I just want to make a black layer. So let's make a new layer, bring it to the bottom, and fill in the color black. So we're already on a way cleaner canvas. We can picture what we're doing, and we just need to align these a little. So let's move them around. Maybe put the drip underneath. And we just want to align these. Now it's looking a little crooked. I'm going to hit Control T. And I wanted to rotate this, which is how I would do it. I hit Control T and then rotate along the outside. But see how big the bounding box is? That can get really annoying later in your edit. So if it's safe to apply your layer mask, let's just go ahead and do that. So now when we hit Control T to adjust something, the bounding box is much more efficient. And we're not zooming in and we're not zooming out a lot of times. So I want to rotate this a little to straighten out the drip. And I might widen it a little. And you can use your left and right arrow keys to position your layer as you do this. So you can get quite fine with your selection. And something like that's going to be good. It's obviously starkly cutting off, but I'm going to make a gradient in the middle here between them. So it's a little more subtle. And then, we'll work on these finer details that are obviously showing that it's not a real image, but we want to make it seem like a total seamless composite, right? So what should we do to start? Let's go to the base frame. And let's make a layer mask without a selection present. If you click this button, you'll just get a white layer mask. So it's showing everywhere. I want to bring up my gradient tool. So I hit G to bring that up. And I'm going to do black to transparent, foreground to transparent. And since black's in my foreground, that'll be the color. And I want to do a gradient this way, just so I'm fading it out a little bit, something like this. And that will kind of subtly fade it in rather than a stark highlight. And that'll give me a little more leeway as we're compositing, as long as we align red flag areas like over here, which is just screaming for some help. So what can we do? Well, we can warp this area to make it better fit. So maybe what I'll do is apply a few pixels of feather, 4 pixels, and I'll grab this corner over here and I'll hit Control J. So that took it and isolated it on its own layer. And I'll hit Control T to bring up the bounding properties. And now I can warp the layer. And how you do that is you click this layer up here. It's called the Warp Mesh tool. And it's one of the most useful tools in product photography compositing, probably ever. It's a really useful tool. So let's click it. And now we can warp things around a little bit better. And I just want to match the angle. And I kind of did it right away. I just want to match the angle it was going down at. And that's a little more appropriate before and after. Now we'll deal with this blemish here, but I just wanted to get that outside curve looking a little bit more believable. We'll have to work on the transition a bit, maybe darken the bottom slightly. It looks a little brighter. But one of the trickier areas, one of the trickier bridges we're going to have to cross is this inner highlight. So I want to do something really similar to what I just did. Let's merge these layers, our composite fix and our drip layer. Let's composite them and I'll rename it drip. And let's work on that inner highlight. So I'll hit L to bring up my lasso tool. And this time with just 2 pixels of feather, because it's going to be a pretty small area, I'm going to grab slightly outside of this highlight. And I'm going to do it kind of crudely on purpose, because the feather will make up the difference. And let's just complete our selection. Great. And how about we isolate it again, just to be safe? So Control J, that isolates it on its own layer. And what I want to do is just pull it over so it matches this inner highlight angle. And then we've matched the padding and we've matched the inner highlights, and it'll be a lot more seamless. So let's go Control T to bring up our editing properties. And again, our beautiful Warp Mesh tool. I really love this tool. It's useful in a lot of different genres and it's pretty intuitive. Well, I want to just match that padding here, which will look super realistic. And that's looking a little more consistent than where it was a moment ago. And it's already helping us visually kind of accept it. So maybe I'll just darken this area a little bit just so it doesn't look like it's going dark to bright, which it does right now. We'll make a curves layer. And I'll put that underneath my base frame, but above the drip frame. And let's just do a darkening effect. And I don't want to apply that everywhere, so I'm going to go to the mask and invert it, Control I. So now that effect is showing up nowhere, I just want to paint it right here in the middle. So I'm going to bring out a brush. And I use a brush to paint white in the layer mask and reveal this curves effect, this darkening effect. So I might just paint it in here, but with a really low flow. So I can just trust my eyeballs and kind of paint it in slowly until I think it's just matching a tiny bit better. Another thing is this line beside it could definitely be fixed, and that line is present in our drip frame. So I'm going to go to the drip frame, hit J to bring up my patch tool. The patch tool, I mean, if the warp tool is the most valuable tool, the patch tool is probably the runner-up. I love the patch tool. Let's grab it and just draw around this blemish and just say goodbye to that blemish. Lovely, that looks a little cleaner to begin with already. Let's grab all of our layers and just raise it up a little bit so it's a little more centered. Something like that. So what should we quickly retouch next? The blemish or the lump down here? Leave your comment in the chat below. And the results are back, and we're going to retouch the blemish up here. So let's do this quickly. I might merge all these layers together. I'm going to grab all of them and hit Control-Shift-Alt-E. I can hit J to bring up my patch tool, and there's two ways I could retouch this. I could patch it, quick and dirty, and just align it with the same angle down there. And that's going to be a 2-second retouch. And that's why I didn't dwell too much on the fact that we have a little blemish, because I knew we could fix it really quickly. But another way you could retouch that if it was in a more stubborn location would be just to recreate this gradient. Let's hit I to bring on our patch tool and just grab this pink color in the foreground where the gradient is starting. And then the color here, the red color, which represents just the lipstick without a highlight on it. So we have both of those colors. Hit G to bring out our gradient. Last time we used foreground to transparent. Now we're going to use foreground to background, which is very useful. And I need to make a selection so this gradient knows where to go. So I'm going to hit L to bring out my lasso tool and just create a really crude selection around our highlight. The reason it's going to be crude is because I'm going to repaint in the layer once I create this gradient in certain areas that I want to improve. So with the selection present, we have our gradient tool out, and I'm going to go left to right. Pardon me. I can hit X to reverse those. You can hit X to reverse your colors, and something like that, which obviously looks very false, but we can bring this in some areas, and you see it would be like how a gradient would be if it fell off a little starker. It goes over the heart, it goes over here, which is why I'm going to create a black mask. Hold Alt and click this mask. And then it's just a matter of bringing out a white brush and just painting it in subtly where you want it. So I want full flow action, and I know it's pretty stark, but let me just paint this in here, and I'm just going to go right over the heart, and then I'll omit it after. But let's just get this gradient kind of fading out. And it's still really crude, but you can see how we just created the gradient to essentially fade out a bit. And you can see a line where that selection stopped. I'll get out my black brush and omit the effect feathering along that line to make it introduce more subtly. And I'll totally omit it anywhere near the heart, obviously. Can't be ruining our heart. And just up there, something like that. And that's quick and crude, but it gives you an idea of how we could just, soften up a gradient or replace a damaged area pretty quickly. So let's make a new layer above this, a black brush in this new layer. And, it can just be a small black feathered brush. I'm just going to paint it over here, holding Shift for a straight line. And I'm just going to try to just get rid of that blemish. Now, I don't mind if the bottom is looking slightly lumpy, because it does give that melted kind of aesthetic to it. But I do want it to match nicely and not have any, huge bumps around the outside of our cosmetic. Let's compress everything again, just for the heck of it. Control-Shift-Alt-E. And I might thin out this drip a little bit. I mean, it's pretty thick drip. It doesn't look too bad, but I think it'd be almost more tension-inducing if it was thinner in the middle. So let's grab a marquee selection, maybe with 10 pixels of feather. Let's grab that drip, Control-J, which hopefully you know by now isolates the layer, and I like to do that. I like to do that plentifully here at workphlo. Control-T to bring up the editing properties, and again, the warp mesh tool. Coming in clutch. I'm going to drag it on the inside and drag it on the inside. And, you could take time to do that really precisely, but I think that creates a lot of tension, having a nice thin middle and, a bulbous end. So I think that's kind of why this shot's kind of interesting, is it creates a bit of tension. Here was our final render we threw together, and I took a second to make sure everything was nice and straightened in this layer, but just using the same tools, the warp tool and the patch tool here and there to clean it up. I like this because it's monochromatic, so if you think about it, it could really easily apply across different colors in a scheme. That would be something super easy to do, because it's only one color. I shoot a lot of straight up, catalog e-commerce work, really simple things. So I like flexing out more creative, fun ideas from time to time, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Leave any comments below if you have any questions. I'll make sure to get back to you. Stay tuned, guys. I'll see you next time here on Workflow. My name's Dustin Dolby, and whatever you're doing, have a fantastic day. I'll see you next time.